about three things: purpose, our ability to listen, and how important it is that we sometimes stop and look for the broader picture and dare to look into the mirror and take the consequence of what we see. And I must admit, I'm extremely bad at listening. I'm a very bad listener as a father. My wife says I'm a very bad listener as a husband, and I'm definitely a very bad listener being a member of our profession. We are much better at talking. But we need to listen, and we need to look into the mirror and see what we see in the mirror. I became a journalist many years ago because I was 17, 18 years old. I wanted to tell important stories to people in order for them to make up their own mind in their lives. I wanted to do good for society, like any of you going into this fabulous profession. After a few years, I realized maybe I spent most of my time doing stories that were good for my career. I did stories that were good for my editors, stories that created clicks, stories that generated quotes in other media that could win me prizes. I was absorbed by the news culture. I did what was demanded of me to be successful. And the thing I realized, standing in front of the mirror, that I wanted to do good for society, maybe I had forgotten that a little bit. Not that people hadn't tried to remind me all along. I don't know about you, but each time I happen to sit next to someone who is not part of the journalistic profession, and I know it's scary when that happens, they always start asking me this question: why are you so negative? I said, what are you talking about? And I know each time it's politicians saying that, I know what they mean. They say, stop asking me critical questions. So I say, don't bother. I'm a journalist. Each time a CEO has sat next to me say, why are you so negative? And I know what they mean. They say, why don't you give me free advertising? And each time I talk to a professor saying, you are doing wrong in the news business. Why are you so negative? Then I say, what do you know about journalism? You are academia. You are elite. And each time I sit next to a stupid neighbor saying, I don't want to watch your news anymore, I said, you have to eat broccoli. You have to watch news. That's what grown-up people do. So I'm not very good at listening. And my reply, and our reply in this industry for years has been, we know what journalism is about. We do what we have always done because we're right, because we're journalists. But if we started listening, what would we hear? This is a survey about trust in different professions in Denmark. It could be your country too. If you look up here, who do people trust? Nurses, doctors, policemen, teachers, electricians. Coming down here, pension consultants, bank consultants, taxi drivers, real estate agents, journalists, and car dealers. What are we doing there? I don't know about you. Do you know the day of the editor? Do you have that? We have that here in Denmark. Once a year, editors meet and we drink brandy and make great speeches about that. We are on the trust. You know Editor's Day? You know, it's like Mother's Day and the day of the cat and the dog. So the only time a year somebody is good to editors is at Editor's Day. But problem is, we think we're in the trust business, but people don't trust us. So we do something wrong. At some point, I wanted to do a book about democracy. I wanted to do a book about the impact journalism has on democracy. I wanted to talk to a smart person who knew about that. And many years ago, when I was a reporter, I went down to Hamburg to talk to the former Prime Minister of West Germany, Chancellor Helmut Schmidt. And I thought, wonder if it was before the fall of the Berlin Wall, and he was very clever. So I thought, he was publisher of this site. So I thought, maybe he also could tell me about democracy and whatever. And this old man, he was 95 at that time. 95. He was sitting in the same office, smoking 22 cigarettes during the hour I was there. Amazing. 95. He had a new wife. She was 80, so I thought, there's hope for everyone. And then he started talking, saying, we live now in media democracies, where media has become more influential than politicians. And in media democracies, politicians are so keen on their own re-election that they focus not on solving people's problems 5 years from now, but getting into the news so they can talk to voters. So they focus on our news criteria. But if our news criteria are about conflict, drama, crooks, and victims, then politics will be about crooks, victims, drama, and conflict, he said. And then he said this: news media do not help democracy. It is so full of negativity, and media democracy produce populists, not leaders. Said, Mr. Schmidt, who are you thinking about? And he said, Silvio Berlusconi. Who do you think he would have mentioned if he hadn't died in November last year? Did we create this man? We have talked about him for 2 days, and we know the answer. Yes, we did. Why? Because Donald Trump talks into the news criteria media. Media loves me, as he said. Why? Because he creates conflict each time you say something. He creates drama. He divides everybody into crooks, Mexicans or Muslims, or victims. All you're losers, but I'll make you winners. Vote for me. When you remember that, $1.9 billion in exposure in 2015 when he was not big, because he was a good story that generated attention because he was news. We have to ask ourselves important questions now. One, what is journalism? Many years ago, I was drinking morning coffee with Bob Woodward in his Georgetown kitchen. So when I wanted to remind our newsroom at a newspaper I worked for, I wanted to tell the reporters that we are very important, that we can tip presidents if we are good enough. So I called good old Bob and asked if he wanted to come to Aarhus. And he said, sure, if you pay me $100,000. And but that was a little overpriced. So I thought, what about the other guy? He's not that smart and therefore not so expensive. So he actually came. Also because he thought that Danish girls were very pretty, which is true. But he said one fantastic thing. I've always thought that the best definition of journalism. Journalism, he said, is not stenography. It's the best obtainable version of the truth. The best obtainable version of the truth. So my moment of truth, the moment I realized I have to do something with myself, the moment I stood in front of the mirror, was a late Friday evening, 1 year after I got my present job at DR. So I was in charge of TV and radio news and online news and our main news program at night. And I was coming home late Friday, Friday evening, you come home late, and after a long week, and finally there, it's weekend, and the wife is sitting there, she's beautiful, and the children are clean for once, and there's red wine in the glass, and there's jelly in the jar, and there's a good movie later, and who knows what will happen later. It will be a fantastic weekend. But first, we have to eat broccoli and watch the news, because that's what grown-up people do, right? In order to get the best obtainable version of the truth of the status of Denmark today in the world. And it went like this. Welcome to TV-avisen. There's a terror threat against Denmark. Shooting incident in Copenhagen. New regional trains not delivered on time. What did they expect? They're from Italy. Cervical cancer is now a danger to young girls. Strike among bus drivers continues. Woman abducted and abused in a cottage in Sweden. We have the pictures of the cottage. Crisis in the Social Democratic Party. Old man runs for president in United States in a crisis. Court case about an airplane accident with a few hundred people who died. That begins. Suppressed North Koreans works out. A giant mechanical spider creates fear in Liverpool. And finally, the weather forecast. The rain continues. Have a nice evening. What is this? And I remember I went back and I looked. What is that? There was nothing wrong with any of the stories. But was that the best obtainable version of the truth? Because then I started reading newspapers in a different way. I started watching our own news programs. I watched 24-hour news programs all over the world to see what are we actually doing. It's like this. This is a global illness. This is culture. And what I want to talk about is something extremely important. Culture, purpose. Why are we here? What's the meaning of journalism? And what are we doing? It's about bad journalistic habits and the need for change. One thing I think is fun. Look, one day I thought it was fun. 2 tabloid newspapers in Denmark, over 1 million people have pain, and their competitor said 11 things we die from. It's pretty interesting. I was fortunate enough to go to the BBC News to do a talk about this. And that morning I grabbed just a picture of BBC News World, their website. You know, BBC, it's the mother of journalism. We all look to the BBC and we copy it because there are so many and they are so smart. So what they do is right. So this is news. This is how you do this. So this was the picture that morning. Go to the BBC this morning or any morning. It's pretty much the same thing. Just look at the headlines here. Just look at the words that were being used. And looking at that, I was so happy that I had a return ticket home from London. It was scary. It's a scary world. Nothing's wrong with any of the stories. But is this the best obtainable version of the world? Really? I promise you one thing. Any photographer in the world would like to win this competition, World Press Photo Award. So this is the highest standard for photography. We are not objective. We are an objective. We zoom in on things. So any photographer try to win this prize to point their camera lenses to what can win them prizes. So it does matter what are the best standard, who wins prizes. This is the 5 winners of the category news in 2015. Look at the pictures. They are beautiful. It is fantastic photography. The only point is, it's the only way you can win this award in the category news. It's about things that are terrible and misery. Pulitzer Prize winners 2015. Just look at the stories. Any of the stories are great, but it's the only kind of story you can win prizes of in the category news. Killings, shooting, corruption. So we all go after stories like that because that's the culture. That's what we want to do. People have started to do research about this. Psychologists examine people's minds because we do something to people's minds. And the conclusion for this study is that negativity controls news flow and therefore also politics and the public debate. Apathy or fear is the result. The risk is that people not only deselect media as sources for news, but also that they disengage in the public debate. And you know what? If that's true, and if I came into journalism because I wanted to do good for society and the people in society, and this is the result, do I have to go on doing what I've always done? Or should I change a little bit? We have to understand we're a filter between reality and the public perception of reality. And what is the perception of reality? If you ask people in my country or your country, are you more secure now than you were 10 years ago? What do you think they answer? Less secure, right? We ask them why. They say because of all the murders, because of the killings, the terrorist attacks, the burglaries, the home robberies. It's terrible. And then we ask them, is that in your city, in Jutland? No, it's in the news. On the front pages, it's on the websites, it's everywhere. It's a terrible situation. Facts of the matter is, we have never been in a situation in the history of mankind where so few people have been killed in wars as in 2016. Never, despite Syria. We have never had a situation where so many people have access to clean water. We have never experienced a situation where so many women get educated. We have never had a situation where people live so long, have such a great health in general. We have never had so few killings in Europe. The risk of dying from a terrorist attack in Europe is lower now than it was ever since 1954. Do you think people know that? No, because we cover them extensively each time there's something happening. I'm not saying we shouldn't. Of course we should. But do we give people the big picture, or do we just do what we've always done? This guy is making analysis all over the world about the content of news and newspapers and TV. And his conclusion is clear. He says, negativity is an illness caused by even serious news media all over the world. The problem is not that the numbers are wrong. The problem is that the picture gets wrong. And you know how scary it is? It's as scary as this. This is a major survey between the gap between perception and reality. Reality and the public perception of reality. So look here, take France for instance. If you ask people in France, how many people are now Muslim in your country? These are numbers from 2014. People will say that 31% of people in France are now Muslim. The right number in 2014 was 8. If you think that now 1/3 of your population have become Muslim, and the only Muslims you know are those you watch wearing suicide belts, blowing themselves up, being extremists, who do you vote for? Unemployment. Look at Italy. The unemployment rate in Italy in 2014 was 12%. But the average Italian, after so many years with Berlusconi journalism, thinks that 49% of the population in Italy are without work and looking for one, can't find it. Where does that come from? And look at United States. The unemployment rate in United States in general went down to 4.5 during the presidential election a few weeks ago. But the Americans in general, in their minds, the perception is that the unemployment rate in the United States is 32. 32. I'm not saying there are not areas in the United States where it's true, but in general, it is not true. So if you have a feeling that the economy is going so bad all over the place, somebody can tap into that fear and that notion and say, I can do something about it. In Austria, they have a presidential election. And the main subject is about making Austria safe. Problem is, it has never been more safe. Never. This is news culture. Where does it come from? My teacher, the first day in journalism school, he told me this: a good story is a bad story. If nobody gets mad, it's not journalism, but advertising. And the Americans say, if it bleeds, it leads, and it's a lie. It's not true anymore. People don't want it. Another lie. We think that the goal of good journalism is to be critical. No, it's not. It's a tool. It's the most important tool. Critical is a tool. It's not the goal. The goal is to give people the best obtainable version of the truth, right? Steve Jobs once said to Rupert Murdoch, Mr. Murdoch, I won't help you, because the axis is no longer between being liberal or conservative. The axis is between constructive and being destructive. And you cast your lot on the destructive side with Fox News, The Sun, and the News of the World. You can be better. So we didn't want to help. We have to change. Einstein once said, without changing our pattern of thought, we'll not be able to solve the problems we created with our current pattern of thought. We have to remember, as David Bornstein sitting down there once said, journalism is a feedback mechanism to help society self-correct. Constructive news, what is that? Is that some kind of North Korean version of journalism where we ignore problems and only paint the sky blue? No, it's not. Neither it's the cute story before the weather. It's not stupid stories that can help you kill time that you find on YouTube about cats on skateboards. No, it's not. It's a supplement. It's a supplement to our normal news criteria. People need inspiration to solution stories that focus on ways out and hope. Constructive news is about possibilities and people who do something the rest of us might learn from. It's about seeing the world with both eyes. Look at this. Breaking news is about now. The goal is speed. We ask questions, when and what. Our style is dramatic. We play the role of police, and we angle our stories on drama and conflict. Investigative reporting, which I love, it's always about yesterday. We try to put the blame on someone. We ask who did it and why did it happen. We're critical. We play the role of prosecutor and sometimes even judge, and we angle our stories on crooks and victims. And that's great. I'm not against that. We should do it. But we can add to that. And constructive stories is always about tomorrow. It's about inspiration. We ask the questions, now what and how? We're curious. We facilitate debates. And we angle stories on possible solutions and best practice. And now, after all this talking and theory, it's easy to talk about it. But how do we do it in practice? Please give a warm hand to two great editors from DR News, Kasper Valbom Høst, national editor, and Ida Ebenskov from the foreign desk.
Hi. If you've been to Denmark on a Friday night, you'll know this is true. Young people drink themselves senseless, and we've done that story a number of times. So a few years ago, we knew that there was a report coming out from the National Board of Health on this topic, and we set out to do the story. The reporter goes and makes a few phone calls. He comes back, and the numbers look like this. There'd been a dramatic drop in the percentage of young people that was drinking way above health guidelines. So the editor and the reporter, they snap into action. They kill the story, deciding that with the new facts, there's nothing to tell. And they move on to some other scandalous news item. The funny thing is that that editor is actually today one of the frontrunners of constructive news in DR.
A couple of weeks ago, I got an email from a journalist who suggested that we should do the story about the risk of genocide in Burundi, in Africa. It made me pause, because we had just done two big stories, one about the riots in South Africa, and one about the risk of famine at Madagascar. And I said to myself, is this a true picture of Africa that we're delivering? Genocide? Riots? Famine? Nothing wrong with the stories. They were credible, they were relevant. But it made me think. I wrote an email to a freelancer in Africa and asked him if he could pitch me some stories about the other side of Africa. That is what the constructive news mindset does to you.
So to me, constructive news story should always begin with some kind of conflict or some kind of challenge. Otherwise, it's not newsy enough, I think. The question is, where do you go from there? Do you seek to widen or promote or dig that conflict deeper? Or do you take a different angle to the story and maybe ask what could be done to solve this? So I think you should always have that challenge to begin with, but it should never end in a conflict when you do a constructive news story. And there is an example here. For the last couple of weeks in DR, we've been focusing on integration of immigrants. That's something that most of you will know about from your own countries. Not trying to pick only the negative stories, only the positive stories, but trying to give like a full picture of what is reality really. We have massive refugee unemployment. We also have a high-profile educational work practice scheme that is not really functioning. Virtually nobody is really signing up for this. But we found one municipality where people actually were signing up in quite large numbers to do this education work practice scheme. So for the top story that night, the anchor goes on air and he talks about the details of the story, presents the details, the numbers, the figures. We have one political comment, I think, but the main item of that top story, we go to Odense, that's the municipality, to see what they are doing that seems to be working. And it looked something like this. We'll just see a short segment.
Men et sted i landet der ved at ske noget, nemlig i Odense.
Boys, I kigger herop en gang.
Her på AMU-centret i Odense er 15 flygtninge ved at lære dansk. Men lad det være sagt med det samme. Ikke helt normalt dansk.
I gentager efter mig, når jeg siger plastiktrumle, stikdåse, stikkontakt,
De kalder det lagerdansk.
En halv palle Mohanad.
Hvis man bliver bedt om at hente for eksempel 5 plastikdunke, så kan det ikke nytte noget, man kommer tilbage med en hæftemaskine eller et eller andet.
For her i klassen har de alle sammen mål. De skal arbejde på et lager, og derfor lærer de 100 ord, man bruger på et lager. En af eleverne er Rudi Abdelkarim, som kom til Danmark fra Syrien for et halvt år siden.
Yeah, that's where it ends.
We ask ourselves two main questions when we work. Number one, what is working? Reporting on a challenge by focusing on a solution. And number two, what is the full picture? Reporting the untold side of the story. And sometimes you really have to cope with that journalistic drive to take a conflict and enlarge it. This is Jens Jørgen Madsen. He's a former CEO in Denmark, and his wife died from cancer. She had the experience that she had to struggle as much with the cancer as with the health system. And Jens Jørgen Madsen promised he would do something about it. So we found out that 1 in 2 complaints in the health system relates to poor communication. And we found something new. We went to a university where they teach their medical students how to communicate with the patients. Let's see a bit of it. And because you don't see the beginning, you should know that the woman is an actor.
Det går hurtigt. Jeg er bange for at dø.
Ja, det forstår jeg godt. Det forstår jeg godt. Men nu er du kommet ind til os, og vi har fået en lille plet. Og det vigtige, når man snakker om kræft, det er, at man får det fanget så tidligt forløbet som muligt, ikke?
Hvordan oplever du det der? Jeg synes, han klarer det rigtig godt. Rigtig sympatisk. God til at spejle patienten og altså, sætte sig ind i hendes følelser, uden at give hende falske forhåbninger.
Men det er meget intenst.
Det er det. Men det er det, vi kommer ud til også.
Et væsentligt punkt er at bruge ord og vendinger, som alle kan forstå.
Jeg vil blive vanvittig, hvis min mekaniker talte til mig på mekanikersprog. Jeg ved ingenting om biler. Jeg vil gerne have det sådan, så jeg kan forstå det. Og det vil mine patienter selvfølgelig også gerne. Så det er noget af det, vi øver os rigtig meget på.
Men det er jo bare skuespil.
Det føler man ikke, når man sidder på den anden side. Det gør man virkelig ikke. Altså, de er så tilpas dygtige, de her skuespillere, at der er ikke nogen tvivl om, at jeg sidder med en rigtig patient. Ja.
Og i dag lærte de kommende læger, at kunsten at lytte og fornemme også er kommunikation.
After this piece, we had a debate online with a doctor. And do you know what? Users tend to like, comment, and share constructive news more than any other pieces of news. And isn't that exactly what we are looking for in a digital future?
So to sum up our work really briefly, we still do all the hard-hitting stories where we hold people responsible, etc., etc. But when we do constructive journalism, we use it as a tool. And we ask for experience, we ask for new ideas. We don't ask people for opinions, because when you ask for opinions, you'll get the same stuff you always do. So when you are looking for that constructive angle, you can ask, does anybody have any new ideas? What's working, or what could others learn from this? 3 simple questions. Thanks.
Thanks.
And very fast. Does this work? It doesn't make it worse, I can say. We now reach 93% of every grown-up Dane in the country, which is pretty okay. We are now also the most trusted news brands in Denmark on TV and radio. We weren't before. And we are now also the biggest, and I can tell you, on TV, and we weren't before. So it hasn't done bad for us doing this. This is spreading around the world. People are picking it up, not because they want to copy exactly what we did, because we think we have found every answer to everything, but we engage each other in a conversation about how we can do this better, and we can learn from others. And that's the whole idea of this, so we can improve it. EBU says this answers the question of why public media quality journalism matters to society, gives our news a clear purpose. And Huffington Post did it, saying people really relate to constructive stories and much more engaged in them than in traditional reporting. And even the BBC has now picked it up, calling it solution-focused journalism.
Now we are working with constructive news on all our platforms. In everything we do, we try to also look at the solutions and not only the problems.
We have done several projects. For example, we launched a project of how to make elderly homes better in Finland, and that was seen as one of the journalism with a major impact, because that really changed the way people behaved and took care of the elderly people. So the whole concept of the program was constructive. That was one example.
The BBC, I understand, is now starting some experiments with what it calls solution-focused news, which is a very similar idea.
I think the time has gone where people only want to be overloaded with problems. They also should, I think that is a secret of good journalism, that you also should encourage them and see, okay, there are solutions, please engage yourself, maybe you also have a good idea for a solution.
And has the content changed? And the rundown, just exactly 8 years later, it looked like this. And I won't go through it, but just look at the words. It has changed a lot, the way we present the world, the best obtainable version of the truth to people. And you know what? Even the weather was better. So nothing is more powerful than our ideas whose time has come. And we need new ideas. We need new ways to concentrate on purpose and listen to what people do and engage in this. And one thing happened. People start interact and call, and people relate to this. There was a woman. She's selling perfume in a little city in Great Britain. And she was so fed up with news. When she heard about this, she sent me a video. A video she and her boyfriend made with an iPhone and some editing program. And I think you should see it. This is one of the persons that we are here to serve. Look what she has to say.
The purpose of the news is to engage and inform, empower people to bring about reform, but their words are being lost by the noise of the storm. We hear about disaster, murder, conflict, and violence, and after a while this becomes white noise like silence. Because when there's a bias for the negative, we lose becoming sensitive, and instead we become emotionally dead. You see, this negativity has been shown to be destructively informing me, dividing me from society by creating this fear and anxiety. For many, they watch helplessly as if we're damned to be. But that's not the only story of the fate of our humanity. Let's hear about progress, acknowledge solutions. This excess of negativity, it's like mental pollution. When we do see good news, it's misrepresented. We hear cats being saved from trees and the conversation is ended, saved instead for an "and finally." But finally, these stories of possibility are being shown to be a vital story for society. We need to learn about how problems are being solved, issues resolved, for the sake of our souls. Not for ignorant bliss, but because we are better than this. We don't need sugarcoating or positive spins. Again, that's a cynical view that this conversation underpins. And don't get it confused with entertainment, PR, or fluff. Enough is enough. It's rigorous journalism reporting on progress, reporting on problems, but not ignoring success. We publicize failure, corruption, and shame, but when it comes to human potential, it's not treated the same, and the hypocrisy is killing me. Are you kidding me? They point the finger at every other industry, but leave them be. As this excess of negativity increases in velocity, atrocity, chasing more controversy. But where is the nobility in preying on morbid curiosity? I feel cheated, defeated by newspapers' allegiance to profits and clickbaits, regardless of if it generates hate and drums up the nation into a fearful state. Some people find it too much to take, and then the stories become lost because people switch off. But if we want a nation that's engaged and informed, it's time to reform. Make a new norm, empower, inspire, help us achieve higher. Report the good in other people, not just replay their evil. If we witness the unbelievable, it makes it more achievable. A solution seems more feasible. The only option now is to freeze or fall. After all, the truth of the world includes the good and the bad, the happy and the sad. So why would you just tell one half of the story? It leaves us in mourning, unable to see that the new day is dawning. The power lies in us becoming aware, to ensure they take more care about the stories they tell when they look at the world out there. And why should we care? Because the truth is the news is an organisation that's intrusive of our minds, and it's a matter of time before their words become our thoughts, shaping our opinions more and more. So what we're asking for, as I've said before, is rigorous journalism reporting on progress, reporting on problems but not ignoring success. It may sound idealistic, it's been labelled naive, but let me assure you this is not an ignorant plea. The research says it's obvious, and to ignore it is preposterous. So it's time for the consumers to take a stand, because the industry will listen to us.
And you know what? Obama stole his slogan from Bob the Builder. So can we fix it? Yes, we can. And we have learned something, one good thing from Trump. Let's make journalism great again. Thank you. And then finally, for the final session, let me introduce some of our fantastic colleagues from the DR drama section, telling you about Borgen and other drama series. Thank you very much.